Hey folks, I figured I'd do a bit of a talk on call rotations. And it's kind of top of mind for me right now because I'm on call this week. I had a bunch of videos filmed prior to this week, and I think I had like six ready to go out, five or six. So if you're watching, like even this one will be posted later in the week. It's only Tuesday right now, but I'm trying to catch up because I'm not driving to work, and that's when I film all my videos, right? So I'm not driving to work because I am on call, and I just don't want to have any time in the car where I might get paged or anything like that. So, and it would be different if it was like a 5 minute drive or something. So it's not. It's a lot longer. I could get stuck in traffic or whatever. It could be like up to an hour. If you watch some of my videos, they're truly like 50 minutes. So it's top of mind for this. Top of mind for me this week. I figured I would kind of go through it, just share some different thoughts, especially around like when I'm getting people on my teams to get ready for on-call shifts for the first time. There's a lot of like people get really nervous, right? It's like, oh no, like I've never had to do this before. Like, what's involved. So I figured I'd talk through that. Just a reminder, if you want questions answered, leave them in the comments, please and thank you. You can send a message to Dev Leader. That's also my main YouTube channel, but it's the sort of the branding I use for all my social media. Send me a message, add as much detail as you want. I'll keep it anonymous to answer your questions. It's kind of like how I drive content on this channel in particular. And then worth noting too, I started doing resume reviews on my main channel. If you go to Dev Leader and you look for the resume review videos, you'll see in those videos how to submit yours if you're interested. So, with that said, let's talk about on call rotations. So, for those of you that aren't familiar with on call rotations, I'm going to describe it a little bit. Um, I must add the caveat that, like, every single place you go, like from team to team, even at the same organization, it could look different. So, the idea is that if you have a live service of some sort, that you are available to be able to assist in helping with issues in the live service in a nutshell, right? So pretty simple definition, but the complexity around that can grow like tremendously depending on what's going on. So for example, you could have like your shift length in terms of like how many days you're on, primary backup kind of setup. You could have within a day, like how many hours for the shift you have. So just in terms of the scheduling and all of that, like you can have like, or even the frequency, right? Are you on call once a month? Is it once a quarter? So there's a whole bunch of different variables. Before I move on, like I will share that I've done some overnight on calls. I've never had like a 24-hour shift, but I've done like 16-hour shifts, 12-hour shifts. And for the most part, the way that I've had on call shifts set up is there's at least one other geography, like a different time zone, that is typically set up. So that's been like at Microsoft in particular, the teams I've been on, that's one of the things that's really beneficial is that the teams I've been on, we've at least structured between like North America and China, which is great. Um, so I've had that. I've had periods where the on call shifts are, uh, I would say, like more frequent, like at least once a month. And that's like I've had periods where I'm managing two teams. One of the teams needs help with their on call shift in terms of staffing that up. And as the manager, like I step in as much as I can to try and help there. So I've had that. I've had like far less frequent, and there's pros and cons to these, right? Like I feel like a lot of people don't love the idea of on call because it's just extra. But in terms of like learning and experience and stuff, it's with silver lining. I feel like it's one of the best ways to learn and get ramped up in an area. It's like a lot of stress in the beginning because you're probably panicking like how do I actually help here, but you're kind of forced to like learn things, which is helpful. It seems kind of funny, but so I've had a whole bunch of different experiences doing this over the past 5 years. I'm sure for people that have had longer careers than me in a area that has live services, I'm sure you've had more experiences on call than I have, and that's like I spent a lot of my first part of my career shipping desktop based software, so no on call. Lots of late nights fixing bugs, but no on call. So Okay, with that said, I think some of the major advice that I like to give individuals before getting ready for their on-call shift is like your your responsibility when you're on call is not that you are the person that fixes all of the bugs. And I think that's one of the reasons why people get very anxious about on call shifts. They're like, okay, so I work in this part of the team, but I'm on call and responsible for all of this stuff. And they're like, I don't know any of that stuff. I haven't seen that code before. What if there's a problem? So I think a lot of people get stressed out about this because how could they be responsible for going to take care and fix issues, like having to go into the code and fix the bugs in these areas that they don't know. So um, at least in the teams that I've worked on, that has never been the expectation. Of course, like if it comes down to it and you're able to, then great. But a lot of the time, it's like we can get the subject matter experts involved. Um, Biggest pieces of advice, though, I would say are like making sure that partners. So if you have like a partner team reaching out to you, because I've worked on platform teams, so there's a lot of partner teams that own services that rely on us. So if we have that, or let's start with that. If we have teams that are reaching out to us, one of the things that I say is like make sure that you're acknowledging them fast. There's like, from my experience doing this, most of the time people just want to make sure that like that someone's listening because they're on call too and they're panicking. They're like, hey, something's wrong with my service or something isn't going as expected or I have questions. And they're sitting there going like, please, please, please respond, right? Especially if they're new to it too. So in my opinion and my experience, like getting back to people fast and just being like, hey, I acknowledge this, even if you don't have the answer right away, but being like, hey, read, received, like looking into it for you, I think that goes a tremendous distance. So I would highly recommend leaning into that because the other approach I've seen people take is like they see the email come in or they see, the message come in and they're like, okay, like I gotta go get the answer first. I really gotta go do a deep dive and investigate this. And then like hours will go by. And then like that team is like they're trying to escalate or they're trying to reach back out and reach out to other people. And it's like all you had to do was let them know, like, I'm looking into this. So one of my pieces of advice is like acknowledge early because people really do appreciate it. I would say like as a beginner, a piece of advice is like there's, and this is again from my experience, there's something to be said about like if you get called, like so a team pages you and they need help, there's something to be said about acknowledging that like, hey, look, I'm new to this, or hey, like I'm trying my best here. I have seen that have. It doesn't sound like it's a calming effect because you're like, what do you mean like you're the new person? But I've been in situations where, and like many of them, many situations where I'm like, hey, like I haven't had to deal with this type of problem yet, so please bear with me. I'm reaching out to other people for help. I'm looking up the resources and acknowledging that with other people. I've noticed that they do really appreciate it. I've noticed in some situations, by the way, this is all internal. I should have clarified that. Internal teams. I could imagine with a customer, they might be like, what the hell, right? Like, get me the expert right now. So, my apologies for not clarifying that sooner. But I found with internal teams, I've been in situations where it's like, hey, this part's new to me. Like, please bear with me. I'm trying. And I've had people be like, hey, like, I'm new to this too. So, like, thank you so much for just helping. Like, I really appreciate it. Like, I'm learning here with you. I don't know. Like, I've statistically had like a very large number of situations like that. So, that's something that I don't know. At this point, I kind of encourage just transparency around like, hey, look, I'm looking into this for you. I might need a little bit of extra time to get the right expert involved or to find the right resource, but like I am trying my best. I think people do appreciate that, at least where have worked. So that's another piece of advice. Um, I think something else to add is like people will say to me like, okay, well, on-call shifts are generally like you might have them during your working hours. So for me, like my current shifts are 12 hours long. And if my working hours are like 9 to 5, let's say, I would do like a, let's say 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. shift. Someone might say, well, hey, or on the weekend, okay, because it'll go on the weekend too. So say on the weekend it's 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. Someone might say, like, well, Does that mean I can't like leave home? Am I stuck? Like, what if I have to get groceries? Like, what if I have to take a shower? Like, what do I do? So my my piece of advice here is, if you are, and we have primary backup, your setup or situation might look different. And we have like paging mechanisms that will fall back to your backup. So um, if it's something like you're taking a shower or whatever, I would just be like, turn your phone on, like it, so you can hear it ring, and then because we have like a couple of mechanisms for paging, I would say just like, if you miss the initial page, like just try to get out of the shower enough to dry your hand off or something to like respond to the next page. And then at that point, if you're like, okay, like I'm literally like, I'm naked because I just had a shower, like get dressed, like do what you got to do, but at least you acknowledge the page. And then I would say, like, within a couple of minutes, like 5-10 minutes, try to make sure that you can get to a computer to go, help. And this is the same thing like with like leaving home and stuff, right? So I've definitely had situations in the past where it's the end of my shift or like towards the end. And because I used to go to the gym at night and my on call shifts used to be 16 hours then, it would mean that like I can't get to the gym until like 10 o'clock. And I would be like, look, like I'm going to go at 9 and the gym is only a couple minutes away. So I've been in situations where I get to the gym and then I have been paged. So, okay, I'm at the gym, I get paged, I respond to it on my phone, I check initially what's going on, and then I can say, oh, like this situation's already understood or whatever. I can transfer what's happening to the right owning team. I could do a quick investigation. Because sometimes, especially on platform teams, you might find situations where someone's like, hey, we think this is your platform. And depending on your experience and the amount of information that's provided, you might be able to say, actually, no, like you're you're observing something that looks like our team, but like based on this information, it's actually this other team. So not an uncommon thing. Um, and I've had situations like that where I'm paged, and instead of me being like, oh man, like now I have to go home, drive the whole 5 minutes home, it's like, oh, actually, no, I can transfer that. That's fine. Or it's understood. It's fine. And then it's great. I just keep going to the gym. And then I've had other times where I'm like, nope, I got to leave. And the reality is that say during the week, just to give you an example, that was Monday to Friday. Instead of me saying, well, I definitely can't go to the gym any day this week, it would be like, okay, maybe the one day I got paged and had to leave, and I was still home within 5 minutes and on a computer, right? Like, um, so there's flexibility, I would say, but you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you cannot help, because then you're kind of dropping the ball. I would say if you're like, if you need that kind of flexibility, so for example, you're like, I have to grocery shop on the weekend or I'm going to starve. Like, I need to be able to step away to do that. Um, Most on call shifts have like some type of backup most of the time. Like, if you're smaller company or like your team doesn't have that, then I mean, you probably want to sort this kind of thing out before your rotation. But for us, and at like the just under 5 years I've been at Microsoft, we've always had like primary backup at least. And there's times where I would say to my backup, like, "Hey, I got to step out for a minute. Like, are you okay to watch for alerts? Like, I just have to like, we have to go to Costco. Like, we don't have any food." It's like, no problem. Or I have to step out. Like, um, I'm just making up like dog got into something, or dogs are barking outside and I have to go like take care of something, or my wife called for help, I have to go help her. Like, can you, there's an hour left in the shift, can you kind of just watch for the alerts, and like I'll be doing that. But communication with your backup and stuff is just key, because if you walk away and then you don't respond and people are expecting you to, like, you end up being like the face of your team at that point. People are depending on you. So, yeah, just making sure that you can communicate with the backup. But otherwise, like, there's some flexibility there. If you are the backup, I would say you have a little bit more flexibility, right? And for us, as an example, like, weekends are generally more quiet. There's less teams, people at work doing stuff. So things are more quiet. But it doesn't mean like, oh, I'm backup, I'm just going to like, I'm going to take a vacation this weekend and like, not have service or something like that. No, um, but I personally feel a little bit more relaxed. I just make sure that I'm available. So if my primary messages me and they're like, "Hey, I need help," I can say no problem. Like, I'll be online within 30 minutes, like tops, because it's like, "Hey, I'm at the grocery store, and like let me know, like give me any details, and I'll be home within like 30 minutes or something." And I've always found like something like that seems okay. But the more like this is kind of nuanced, right? Like you have to sort this kind of stuff out on your team. I encourage you to have those conversations ahead of time, um, because I think you would appreciate the same thing, right? If your backup was like, oh, like I'm in the car for another 3 hours, and you're like, well, what kind of backup are you? Like that's not that's not a lot of help, right? Have those conversations ahead of time. I'll give you another example. Like I swapped rotations with someone and I said, I can swap, but on this particular evening, I need to finish a little bit early. And they said, no problem. We'll sort that out. Like easy conversation to have. Just have the conversation. Okay. So, a couple things we talked about so far, just to do a little check in, and some things that I should kind of drill more into. When you're on call, you are not solely responsible for fixing all the code. So we should probably come back to this. I do recommend you engage early. Um, I was talking about like sort of a response time, and then also like this transparency around like if you're new to it, like I think acknowledging that's kind of helpful. Uh, so okay, well, what happens, right? You get paged. Like, what do you need to do? Now, there's a lot of different things that like different teams will handle this in different ways. Um, the teams that I have worked on try to build up repositories of like how you sort through things that come up when you're running a service, right? So if you can imagine, you have automation that's kicking off alerts to you saying like, "Hey, this doesn't look good over here," or you have a team that's like, "Hi, like we have this issue." What like, I would recommend this based on my experience now because this has seemed to work pretty well. Is trying to document the processes that people follow to be able to sort through things, right? So if you see these patterns where like this type of issue comes up, right? There's a computer that's running in a data center somewhere. Things aren't going so great on it. Okay, like, well, what do you do? Because that's not a situation that like won't ever happen again. It's entirely possible. And likely there's going to be a situation in the future where you're getting signals from a machine where it's like, "Hey, there's a lot going on here. Someone should look at this." Okay, well, how do you get more information? How do you figure out the steps or like what you should do next to go investigate? So these are the types of things I would recommend, either putting into like a wiki, some type of repository of information. I think now, like these days, especially with like all of the AI tools, there's probably a lot of awesome stuff you can do to have like sort of this repository of information set up, and you could ask AI like, "Hey, I'm encountering this type of thing." Like this would probably be something that your company runs, not like, "Hey, ChatGPT, here's all of our internal documentation. Tell me what to do." But I can imagine like leveraging AI tools here, right? To be like, "Hey, here's what I'm observing. Could you suggest where I should go look?" Right? Like, do we have documentation on this? Can you point out like maybe a good starting point? If you don't have AI for that, then like, yeah, by all means, like having something like a wiki that's easily searchable, something else to think about. And another piece of advice is like when people are writing up, like, here's how I navigated solving this thing. Um, this is kind of might sound counterintuitive, but I've noticed sometimes when you have experts write like, here's how to go solve this problem, what happens is that they probably call out some critical things, which is great because they're the expert, but they end up making some assumptions that they don't include in the steps or like what to be thinking about. Like they kind of do little shortcuts because in their mind, they're the expert. They've done it a million times. So I would recommend, if you are someone that's more junior, right? And you're on call, you had to go troubleshoot something and there wasn't documentation. I would say like you should go write that. And what I recommend is like you don't just say to the more senior person like, "Hey, you're the expert in this area. You go write it all." I would say you should try to take a stab at writing that. At a minimum, if the other person's going to write it, I think it's critical that someone who's less experienced goes through and tries to make sure that it makes sense to them. And that's because the next person that's on call that's going to need that is probably not the expert. They didn't need it in the first place. So you want to kind of like sanity check that stuff and have someone that's less experienced go through and say, okay, I can follow these steps. So yeah, you could have someone more experienced write it, but have someone less experienced kind of exercise it and make sure that things feel good. But this has been something that works really well for us. I would say that if you have alerting systems and things like that, um, you can even, depending on the complexity of your systems and stuff, like if you can call out like, here's the resource for going to like troubleshoot this, like great, like the more that you can streamline trying to help the people that have to go put out the fires, the better. And you just kind of think about it, right? If you're an on-call engineer and you're it's always going to feel some level of stress when you're on call, right? Like you have your normal work stuff that might already be stressful for you. And now it's like on top of that, you're going to have either teams reaching out to you. You get these paging alerts coming in and you're like, man, like I don't want to do this. You're stressed out about it. It's going to be harder to problem solve and think through things just because of that elevated stress. So think about like what little things you could do just to alleviate some amount of stress, right? So, like I said, having the stuff documented. Could you imagine how much more comforting it is when you're like, I don't know what the hell this issue is? Like, I got this paging alert. It says something's broken, and you're like, I just don't know. And then you take a piece of that and you search it in your wiki, and there's this step by step guide, and you're like, oh man, like, thank you. And then it doesn't work partway through. But yeah, it's like it's a lot more reassuring and can calm people. They can think through things more clearly. So, trying to think some other pieces of advice. This is maybe like a team dynamic kind of thing. So I've worked on teams where there's a pretty big dichotomy of like expertise. So there would be some people on the team that have been around for ages and they're truly like experts, like call them like historians because they know all of the ins and outs, like the legacy parts of the systems, all the quirks and stuff like that. And they also just have experience navigating all these things. And you can kind of put like any type of on-call issue in front of them, even if they haven't seen something like that before, they can probably figure it out pretty quick. So we got people like that. So that's a small population. There's also a small population of like folks in the middle. And then I've noticed like on the teams I've been on personally is that there's a much larger population of like newer developers. And that could be new to the team, but also like junior. So a combination of the two. And of course, people, when they're on call and they start to feel anxious and it's like, oh, something comes in. If you don't know the answer right away, this kind of is like if you've watched my other videos about like junior developers asking questions and stuff, we fall into this trap sometimes of like I don't know what to do, please help. When someone ends up doing the work for you, it feels like hell yeah, like we got the problem solved, right? Like the fire's been put out. The problem is that it kind of perpetuates this. So in my example that I'm giving you, when you have the experts on the team and you're like, hey, so and so is the expert, I'll just reach out for help. They'll definitely be able to help. You know it. And then their help to you is they go, oh, like this is the exact issue. Here's exactly how you solve it. And sometimes it's like, and I already did it. It's like it feels good because the problem's solved, but the challenge is like next time it happens, like you might feel like, oh, it was just easy. You just do these steps, but you didn't practice it. And I have absolutely found I'm sharing this with you because I found myself in these situations where I'm like, oh, like thankfully issues been averted. We're good. And then it happens the next time I'm on call and I'm like, I can't remember the other step that was taken. Like I have an idea and then I have to reach out to the person again. I'm like, I remember we did something regarding this. And I have to like basically what I'm trying to say is, and if you're the person asking the questions, I urge you to kind of think about this kind of stuff this way is don't ask people to solve your specific problem. I actually did this today and I wanted to kind of share something. I'm not going to give you the details, obviously, but I was trying to troubleshoot something. And I know the person that I reached out to is an absolute ninja with all of the things related to like our live site service, like live site issues for our service. They can navigate anything. They know where all of the tools are. They know where all the signals are, all the dashboards. They're amazing. And I was working with my sort of partner in terms of our on call rotation. We were looking at something and we were like, this isn't really adding up between the two of us, isn't really adding up. And I said, I should reach out to this person. But I know from my experience so far with people like this that are so good, I'm like, I need to get better at this. So what I did was I said, hey, in a situation that looks like X, I said, number one, I think that I would expect this to kind of let them know, like, I've been thinking about this. I'm not just like, you know, pinging you to say, like, please do this for me. But I'm like, I would expect this. And also, like, if I wanted to find more, where would I go? And kind of hinted, like, I can't seem to find like documentation on this. What I didn't do was like paste all of the information, give them all the details, because I know that they would go solve it immediately because they can and they could do it super fast. In this situation, at least, I was like, this isn't like the world is on fire and I need someone to go like put it out immediately. I was like, I know there's an opportunity here where we can learn and like I'm not saying like take our time for a week, but we could at least like go poke around for a bit and try to learn. So I asked it this particular way so that I could get the resources and then I could go do the work. That was the intention. So I structured it that way on purpose. Now, in this case, it was kind of ironic because I didn't tell them the information and they happened to go look up the information. They knew exactly what I was talking about and I whatever. This is just a tangent, but I ended up taking a screenshot of it to the other on call and I said, I didn't even tell this person what the issue was and they figured it out. So that's how good they were. The point is that I encourage you, if it's not something where the entire world is on fire and you need like to immediately like resolve everything because it's so bad, I would recommend that if you have the opportunity, try taking the steps yourself. If someone's like, hey, give me a call, we'll screen share and I'll walk you through it, you walk through it. You be in the driver's seat. It's a little slower and it might feel clumsy because it's like pair programming, right? Someone's telling you like how to go drive and you're like, oh, like where's this button I have to click? It seems like it's so insignificant, but I strongly encourage you do it because that compared to just watching someone do it, I can tell you, at least from my experience, you don't retain it. Not as well at least. So that's my suggestion is like try to do the driving yourself. And if you know that you're talking to an expert on something, try to frame your situation a little bit more generically, so that you have the opportunity to go follow up and dive in. So um, I think that's where I'll wrap it up. I wanted to say, like, if you have questions about on-call shifts and stuff, like, ask them below. This is the first time I think I've talked about it, so a lot of the other topics are variations of similar things. So I've kind of thought a lot more about them. This is kind of the first time I've been thinking about this because it's top of mind for me. So yeah, if you have questions, leave them below. Quick reminder, right? Like this is going to be different everywhere. I switched teams last year. Our on call is different. Some very similar pieces, but it's different. Um, so just keep that in mind. And yeah, at the end of the day, at least the teams I've worked on, everyone's extremely supportive. So I think sometimes people go into these shifts feeling like, it's me against the world. But like I've reminded people that I've worked with, like, whole team's here to support you. You're not alone. You're going to be the face of the team. So the alerts come to you. Partners will reach out to you. You're the face of the team, but it's okay. We're all here to support you. And I've even told some folks on my team that are newer, like, hey, I know you're going to be like, this is your first rotation over the weekend. Like, if I'm around, like, hey, just so you know, I'm around this weekend. Ping me if you need me. Like, I try to make myself available because I want people to not be going into that panicking the whole time. So, hopefully, you have a team that you're surrounded by that's there to support you. And I hope that's a good reminder that, like, you know, you get some backup. I'll wrap it up there. Thanks, folks. I appreciate it. I'll see you next time.